The Senators have been finding their groove. The Seattle Kraken are one of the league's surprise teams early, and the Columbus Blue Jackets seek consistency. All that and a lot more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Sens Central, Locked On Senators, Ross Levitan. And Ross, Saturday was a pretty good day for the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, to say the least, Gil, always appreciate you having me. And it was a much-needed big win. The Sens had 2 wins going into yesterday, or 3 rather, and they were all by 1 goal. Ottawa hadn't been able to open one up like they did in a 7-1 victory. And with that, they're also trying to just stay to 500 while Brady Tkachuk's out of the lineup. So all of a sudden, after a brutal loss to Buffalo, 8-4 last Wednesday, they're 2 Wednesdays ago now, the Sens are 3-1-1. So it's a lot of ground they've got to make up. This Atlantic Division is outstanding. Every single Atlantic Division team won on Saturday, except for Buffalo, and they still got a point against an Atlantic Division team. So somebody had to give up a point there. So it's going to be competitive all the way through, and at least Ottawa, like they have in years past, fallen back out of the race. They're not allowing a couple bad games to spiral at the start of the season.
You mentioned Brady Tkachuk. What is the response of this team to his now, expected long-term absence? And what does he mean to this organization?
Well, he's everything to the organization. On Locked On Sens, every summer we do our value rankings where every prospect, every player in order, what they mean to the organization. And it's the 4th year in a row that it's been Brady Tkachuk at number 1, despite more arguments within the fan base than ever that it should be Tim Stützle or Jake Sanderson. It was a pretty even split between those two. But again, Brady reigns supreme, not only because he's a perennial 30-goal scorer and has that knack for stepping up in the biggest moments, but he's also the heartbeat of the team leadership-wise. So with him out of the lineup, these other young kids are going to have to step up and be that, like you see Sanderson wears an A, Stützle wears an A. They kind of rotate between the two. But something that general manager Steve Staios did a really good job since coming into the role that he's in now is bring in veterans to support the younger players. Michael Amadio and David Perron, most notably up front, have done a really good job of kind of lowering the heart rate, I would say, at those tough moments in games. So that's one thing. But the other thing is just the straight up production you're losing with Brady Tkachuk out of the lineup. And they've had a lot of goals scored down the middle of the ice. Just Dylan Cousins and Shane Pinto have scored 45% of the Sens' total goals this season. Your second and your third line center on paper. So I think they've done a really good job of, at least recently with this 3-1-1 stretch, gotten contributions from all over the lineup. But you can't discount what Brady Tkachuk means to this team. And it's great to see that even a week out of surgery, he was on the trip. It's a thumb injury, so he can still skate. He was on the ice with the team for the morning skate, doing drills with one hand on his stick. So I think that that's a huge leadership quality that's allowing this team to kind of bond together. And we saw it last night in the game, Gil. I don't know if you saw Linus Ullmark make a sprint from his own net all the way down because Charlie Lindgren was getting involved, and that meant it was an odd-numbered altercation behind the Capitals net. So you win big, you stand up for your teammates, everyone's got each other's back, and it's a good feeling going into a back-to-back Monday, Tuesday against 2 teams that, frankly, if you want to compete in the East, you should beat. In Boston at home, divisional matchup tonight, and then tomorrow they're going on the road, second half of back-to-back in Chicago against a team who's, quote, unquote, overperformed so far this season.
You mentioned Shane Pinto off to a red-hot start right now. Talk to me about what he's accomplished so far and what that means for this team.
Yeah, well, a Long Island kid who's gone through so much adversity through his young NHL career. Everyone knows about the 41 game suspension that he served. There was nothing nefarious about it. It was just bad decision in terms of where he was. Was like there's no betting on hockey. Otherwise, the suspension would have obviously been way worse. So tough situation. The team supported him through that, made sure that he got back, gave him a league minimum contract just to play the season. He did really well when he came back. Then last year, exceedingly just developed into this player that you could trust against the other team's top line, but then would produce offense himself. This year, I don't think he's going to score 90 goals like he's on pace for, but I do think that he is still stepping up into the player we're going to see in 2-3 years when he's really in his prime. So I think you can't say enough good things about what he does away from the puck, giving him opportunity to play in these great roles where even though he would be listed as the third line center, he'd play the most minutes or the second most minutes of any forward on the team. So ironically, it's kind of funny because last year the whole story was that he wasn't getting power play time. He wanted power play time, but they said, we need you in a defensive role. Well, this season he has, and yet all 8 of his goals have been scored at even strength. He's tied for the NHL lead in goal scoring. So none of the damage has come on the power play. Dylan Cousins, the other player I mentioned, his scoring's been a lot on the power play. But to have that sequence of Stützle, 1, then Cousins, Dylan, the Sens have 2. The other one scored last night too, Nick Cousins. But you got Dylan Cousins and then Shane Pinto. You're really seeing kind of the spine of this team and the wins and losses. Obviously, there's other things. Penalty kill needs to improve. Goaltending's a big story. But down the middle of the ice up front, you can really see what Ottawa's trying to build. And if those 3 hit their potential, they're going to be a tough team to match up against.
You mentioned the penalty kill. You mentioned the goaltending. What does this team need to do to win consistently and compete in what you accurately described as a very tough Atlantic division?
Yeah, well, last night was a good start, or Saturday night, I should say, where they went 100% on the PK. They rose their average to enough to get off the basement level with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Well, you can't have a PK in the 60s. It's not a recipe for success. So they just need to stick with the aggressive nature of their penalty kill. I find when they do have trouble, they play a diamond formation, which a lot of teams do, but the key to that is being aggressive, because if you're not, you give so much space down low on the half wall, and guys can either jam it in tight, look for a rebound, or they can walk slowly to the middle of the ice and find a lane to get a better opportunity. So it's really just been a mix of not getting a big save on the PK, but more so allowing way too much time and space. In the first few games, too, you're going up against Tampa Bay. I know they've struggled, but they've got elite offensive players. Then you have the Florida Panthers in the next game, and right after those 2 games, you've already given up 7 power play goals against. So it's been a little bit better over the last number of games, but they have to be in the top half of the league if they want to have success. And down at 28th, 29th overall, it's just not going to get it done. So, of course, you want more saves. You always do. But I think there's a lot in terms of the strategy of the PK that if they make those adjustments, I think the players are good enough on it to play their role and be a middle of the pack unit. I'm not saying they're top 5 kill, but they won't be at the bottom of the league if they can make those adjustments.
And how about Ullmark? How has he looked so far, and does the team need him to step up a little bit more?
Well, I think he's on the right track for sure. His first couple of games, there were some goals that you would have liked back. There were also some huge saves, and that's kind of been the tale of 2 stories of Linus Ullmark's season. The stats up until the past 2 games hadn't matched the big saves that he was making as well. So with that said, like, it was big saves and bad goals. That was the story of his season so far, and it really culminated in that game last Saturday against the New York Islanders, where Ottawa was gifted that game multiple times. You get leads in it, and they could never shut it down. And even, it's a great play by Anders Lee to push Spence off the puck, but he had no option but to just push it along the ice, and Ullmark lifted his pad. It went right through. So just a little mistake, little adjustment, and I think we would have seen better numbers already. But in his past 2 games, both wins, he's rocking a .944 save percentage. So two goals against total in 1 goal in each of the last 2 games against, and they're going to need him to be a top goalie if they want to have success as well.
All right, Ross, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
Yeah, for sure. Locked On Senators is daily wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. We've actually got legendary, I'll call him, play-by-play voice, John Forsland, who's on Prime Amazon games up in Canada. So he's calling Sens Bruins tonight north of the border. He's obviously the daily play-by-play guy for the Seattle Kraken. So he's going to join us, talk a little bit about broadcasting and get into a game day preview. And you can find us on social media as well at Sens Central on Twitter.
All right, Ross, thank you so much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to the fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you could even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late-game push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Again, place a $5 bet, and if your first $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So head over to FanDuel.com today. FanDuel, check it out. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show a familiar face and voice to the Locked On NHL channel, Erica L. Ayala of Locked On Kraken. And Erica, you got to be happy with the way this team has started this season.
Oh, 100%, Gil. You know, we talked about this new head coach coming in, third head coach in 5 seasons, didn't really bode well for the confidence of being that quote unquote perennial playoff team that the brass, the ownership and front office keep talking about. But early returns, as we'll get into here, Gil, are that someone that you and your organization knows well is maybe getting and pressing the right buttons is how I'll say it. He's maybe pressing the right buttons early on to really give a spark to this team and build some structure and discipline in this Seattle Kraken franchise.
Well, he does come from the Barry Trotz school. He was an assistant under Trotz. What buttons is he pushing so far?
I've said this a bunch on the Locked On Kraken show, but I was in Seattle for training camp. I really prioritized trying to be there the first handful of days. And I'm really grateful that I did that because the very first day of official practices, what we saw Lane Lambert do is run drills. You see that a lot. High intensity drills. There was an expectation that the players came in with a certain fitness level. But what I found interesting, and I have never seen since going to Kraken training camp, is that he stopped drills. Now, these are not complicated drills. They are pretty standard drills that I've seen around hockey rinks at all levels that I've covered. But the fact that he was stopping to really talk through and show the team what he wanted, that impressed me. And I think it explains why the defensive structure, the power play in particular, but special teams overall, being more structured, being more sharp and direct, that is the demand. And it started from that first day at Camp Gill. It was indicative to me that Lane Lambert is not the kind of coach that's going to sweep things under the rug. He'll give people time to grow. Of course, you need to do that. And he's also going to help you meet the expectation by showing you and talking you through it. And for me, that focus on discipline, yes, but also, again, meeting the players where they're at, making sure there's a open communication and understanding, that has been missing from the Seattle Kraken team in the first 4 seasons.
Well, you talked about the improvements behind the bench. How about the players? Who have been the key contributors to this surprising start?
And what is maybe not surprising to Kraken fans is that it is still the usual suspects. Right now, Jordan Eberle and Jaden Schwartz, 2 of the 3 J's, as I like to say, triple J for Jaden, Jared, and Jordan. But McCann is out of the lineup, and we usually can rely on him. But we're seeing Jordan Eberle, our captain, and and Jaden Schwartz play the style, especially with Schwartzy. We're seeing him play the style that Lane Lambert wants. He wants net front presence. You don't have to convince Jaden of that. He's always played that way with the Kraken. It's a net front presence. It's a grittiness. It's, again, being able to make the right reads. And right now we're seeing the veteran players really step up. I think other players that we see doing a really great job, Matty Beniers is on that top line, setting up Eberle really well. We've also seen Berkeley Catton, a surprise to me. That's probably the biggest surprise. Now, it's a small sample size, just 4 NHL games, but he's already got 2 assists, and Eberle has had a brace or 2 goals in the last 2 games. And again, Catton is able to really work well. His creativity, and even when things aren't connecting necessarily, you see that his awareness, his IQ is super sharp, and he's starting to get comfortable with trying what's in his head, and he's able to execute on the reads that he's making in real time. And so it's definitely, again, you can't go wrong with our leading point scorers, both, again, Eberle and Jaden Schwartz with 8 points, but it's also the contributions that you're getting from Beniers at center. Chandler Stevenson has been solid offensively as a centerman, especially in the faceoff dot. And Berkeley Catton, again, a surprise this season, and he's been getting some time with players like McCann out of the lineup.
Talk to me about the goaltending and what that's meant to this team's success.
Coming in, there were a lot of questions because we saw that Philip Grubauer was sent down to the AHL, our Coachella Valley Firebirds last season. But in the offseason, the Seattle Kraken did not, buy him out. And it's something, honestly, that the fan base has been wondering and speculating about really for the better part of the last 2 seasons. It just hasn't seemed to work out with Philip Grubauer, but he is on the roster. He's expected, of course, to compete in the Olympics for Team Germany. But he's not the only goaltender. Joey Daccord is still the number 1 guy for the Seattle Kraken. But then they also have Matt Murray. So they brought in a veteran guy. And I like how the organization is talking about carrying 3 goaltenders. Some of it is just to get rest. And that's a big point of emphasis that I've been talking about for years on the Locked On Kraken show, whether it's Joey Daccord, Philip Grubauer when he was our starting goaltender, Martin Jones in that amazing season 2. We work our goaltenders hard because we don't often have defensive discipline, and we've even seen lapses this season. But when you have 3 goaltenders, you can give one goaltender a practice off, so he's not going up against his own guys, and you keep everyone on their toes. Joey Daccord has already been pulled from a game not performing the way he wanted. He didn't complete that game. I believe it was against Philadelphia. Got pulled in that 3rd period. So again, there's an expectation and also clear communication and a short leash in certain areas, and goaltending happens to be one of them. I think Joey Daccord had a little bit of a lapse again after that Philly game, and even before, we talked about on the podcast, he looked maybe a little uncomfortable or maybe just not as focused as we wanted him to be. He was coming off of a very emotional ceremony, ASU retiring his jersey. It was right around that time where I think you saw some of the fatigue. But he's been super sharp, got a shutout the other night against Winnipeg, and was able to get the win against Edmonton and been pretty solid in net, Joey Daccord.
Pretty good competition there. So yeah, absolutely. All right. Talk to me about this. There are skeptics out there who are going to say this team is hot, but they're not going to do it over the long haul. What are the keys to maintaining this early start?
Well, first, I'd say that the skeptics, the Kraken historically, in our very short history, we haven't proven skeptics wrong. We just haven't. And so, I've said this on the show, just because we have the best start, we had 5 games where we were able to earn a point. And just because that was our best start doesn't mean it's great. There's still a lot that this team needs to focus on. So I will just say that I try not to be Pollyanna on the Locked On Kraken podcast. And when you look at the wins against Winnipeg, when you look at the win even earlier in the season against Vegas, which is a team we know we're going to have to beat in the division, you look at the most recent game against Edmonton, a team that has struggled, but we know what they are on the back end of the season. So glad we caught them early. This is a team that is their best when they lean into their defensive identity. Now, what that looks like is, still really looking good. I believe now with the most recent win, we're almost, 5-0 when we play and we're able to score first in games. We have not let up a lead in the first period in quite some time. And that's what this Kraken team is going to want to do. Their identity is defensive. Their identity is to attack first because they're going to lean into their defense, knowing that they are not going to be a high scoring team. And in the past, it has felt like there is a disconnect, between that lunch pail, blue collar style that we were hearing from the coach and then the execution of that style on the ice. Whether it was Dave Haxtell, who really leaned into that lunch pail, but there just was never enough offensive creativity. Or you look at what Dan Bilesma wanted to do, where he really wanted to attack and use speed, but there was a lack of structure when it came to especially things like special teams. Lane Lambert is kind of grabbing the best of what has worked for the Kraken in years past. And he has the skill set to, again, execute on those things. The net front presence, being able to be much more creative as a coaching staff when developing the power play, which has looked very good. Guys are really selling out the body. Vince Dunn with a huge block to secure the 3-2 win the other night against Edmonton. And it's Berkeley Catton blocking shots and things of that nature. Now, you don't want to go overboard, of course, on the block shots category. But another thing is that we're seeing the Kraken lay down hits, Gil. Now, I've always wanted more sandpaper on this team. We don't have a big enforcer guy. I mean, yes, the NHL is kind of going away from that style regardless. But even if it was an enforcer style NHL, there are no enforcers. And we never really have had one. Maybe Carson Soucy, right? That was probably our closest one at times there. But we have to play a disciplined game. We're not going to win the finesse games. We're not going to win the bully ball, as I sometimes say, or the overly physical games. So we have to meet in the middle. And usually that is hard work. It's defense. It's truly playing as a team. And I think they're doing a much better job, not perfect, but a much better job than we've seen in the past of protecting their netminders and not having them have to be the best player on the ice every night to even have a chance to win. They're doing it as a team with their defense, and then guys are able to step up to get them the win, like we saw Ty Cartier do the other night.
All right, Erica, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Well, as always, Gil, thank you for having me. And just like every other show on the Locked On Podcast Network, you can start by looking for us on YouTube or your audio player of choice. And you can also find us on social media, most active on TikTok. But we do have some help on the social media front. So you can find us on Instagram. And I think we're reviving the Twitter up again, Gil. And that will all be at Locked On Kraken.
All right, Erica, thanks so much.
Thank you, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I love that what you see is what you pay. There are no hidden fees at checkout. Plus, I could see exactly what my view from my seat looks like before I get the tickets with their in-app seat view feature. And you can even find NHL tickets for under $25. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Blue Jackets, Jay Forster. And Jay, it's been a little better after a slow start. 3 of the last 4. What's been the big difference over the last few games for this team?
They've remembered that they're allowed to score goals. mostly. There's been some ups and downs to start the season. They had a good performance. I think game 2 against Minnesota, Kromachenko hat-trick, scored 7 goals. But since then, for the most part, it's been tough to find offense, which is concerning a little bit for a team that I think had the most 5-on-5 goals in the entire league last season, that they can't find those goals again this season. It's coming. They're figuring it out. They put 5 past Dallas on Friday. Nope, that's a lie. They put 5 past Dallas on Thursday, I believe it was. And then they put 5 past 4 plus a shootout goal past the Penguins this past weekend. So, they're figuring it out. But the offense has been a little bit slow to get started. And I think partially there was some questionable line decisions made by head coach Shane Pinto, who I typically like, and I don't necessarily agree with his decisions, but I can see why he's made them. This time, though, there have been a lot of decisions where I'm like, don't know how I feel about that one, and they have been changed because shockingly the team couldn't score with these line decisions, and the new lines are immediately much more impactful. So I think it turns out that if you put skilled players in the top 6 and let them play together, then you get more goals than if you put skilled players in the bottom 6 and grinders in the top 6. But who could possibly have seen that coming, right?
Usually teams are looking for some kind of balance where there's at least one physical player on a line, one passer, one scorer. How bad were these line combinations early on?
I mean, they weren't terrible, right? The top line, which was one of the best lines in hockey last season, stayed mostly intact. My issue was mostly that you've got your star franchise center in Adam Fantilli, 21 years old. You should be surrounding him with all of the skill you possibly can, right? And a big off-season conversation was, well, what are they going to do to have Fantilli? What are they going to do to put skill on Fantilli's wing? And they decided to start the season with Boone Jenner and Cole Sillinger as his wingers, which I like both players. I don't know that I would consider either of those guys pure skill guys. And then they've got Kent Johnson, who is just all skill, all offense, all flash. And I mean that in a complimentary way. He's flash with substance, not empty calorie flash. But he's playing on the third line. He's getting basically no minutes, and he's not putting anything together with those minutes, right? And again, Fantilli and Johnson were a great duo last year. Once Fantilli got Johnson on his line, he took off. I think he had 24 of his 31 goals were with Johnson on his line, and for the second half of the season. So it was just, again, a really confusing choice. Again, nothing wild of we're going to put Kromachenko on the 4th line or anything like that. But there was definitely some tweaks that I thought should have been no-brainers to make if you're having trouble scoring, that they took a couple of games longer than they really should have done to be like, oh, well, maybe we should try this thing that demonstrably worked all of last season. So again, nothing massive, but a small concern to start the season, right?
Another concern obviously has to be special teams. They've struggled on both the power play and the penalty kill. What's missing right now, and how can they
I knew. If I knew that, I would already have gone to Columbus to talk to Dean Everson about it. No. The power play is, I think, just cursed. It hasn't been good, and I'm not being hyperbolic here. The last time the power play was in the top half of the league was I believe the 2017-2018 season when Sam Gagner was with the Columbus Blue Jackets. If people remember that one season that they had Sam Gagner, he was on the power play. It all went through him. That was the last time the power play has been even competent. It has been bottom third of the league since then, and it's not getting any better. I will say that for the power play, looking at the underlying statistics, it looks a lot better than it has in previous seasons in terms of generating of offense, but they can't score, which has kind of been the story all season, right? Of they need to figure out how to score goals full stop, which is better because last season it looked terrible, and also the stats said it was terrible. This season, it's terrible, but the stats say that actually it looks pretty good. So I'm hoping that, there's going to be some kind of tipping point. The penalty kill makes me want to tear my hair out. I believe they're sitting at around about a 60% success rate on the penalty kill. Yeah. There was a blissful moment for 2 days earlier this week when they were 31st in the league instead of 32nd in the league. Now they are right back to 32nd in the league. Some of it has been just a lot of penalties like they've been called for a lot more penalties than they usually are. Like Columbus is usually a pretty low special teams team. They don't take a lot of penalties. They don't draw a lot of penalties. They play a lot of 5-on-5 hockey typically. They've taken a lot of penalties to start the season. I think that's kind of exacerbating the problem. But also it's I don't know if it's a systems thing. I don't know if it's a personnel thing. I don't know if it's a coaching thing. I do know that I'm pretty sure the same coach has been running the penalty kill for the last 3 or 4 seasons, and it has looked terrible the entire time. So I don't know whether that's potentially to blame. But just whatever it is, it is so frustrating. If this team had even a league average penalty kill, they probably are close to being 6-2 instead of 4-4, which is what they are at the minute.
What does it take to sustain the recent success? What are the keys for this team to either contend for like they did last year or even make the playoffs this year?
I think mostly just kind of keep doing what they're doing. This year, it's been interesting. They've been pretty solid defensively, and also the goaltending has been excellent, which is genuinely shocking to me because I wasn't expecting this level of goaltending specifically out of most league kids. But Jet Greaves has also started really, really strong. They both kind of wobbled this weekend. Neither of them had a great game against Washington or Pittsburgh, but like the team goaltending is, I think, 6th in the league in terms of goals saved above expected. Which is, I don't remember the last time the Blue Jackets were above like 25th, and again, maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic there, but the goaltending has been really, really good. They're creating a lot of offense. It's just not going in the net, right? And some of that is bad luck. Some of that is maybe, shot selection, shot quality, whatever you want to call it. The goals will come if they keep doing their thing. And like, again, 500 hockey is not the end of the world, right? Like, they're playing decent hockey. They've probably won some games that they should have lost and lost some games that they should have won. That'll happen. They just got to keep playing their game. Like, they're not playing, even in most of the games that they play, even the losses, they have not played badly. I think that I would consider that of their 8 games so far, they've maybe played like 1 game, I think, where I've sat down afterwards and been like, that was an atrocious effort by everyone involved. So, if they're playing 7 out of 8 games where I'm like, you know what, actually, they played pretty well. I know there's no moral victories in the NHL, but it's a good sign that they are, even if they're not getting the wins, they're playing well. And if they keep playing the way that they're going, they keep getting the goaltending that they're getting currently, things will continue to improve. It's a long season, It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It is a marathon, not a sprint. No question about that. Jay, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
So you can find me over on Blue Sky. I'm JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show still over on Twitter for now at LO_Blue Jackets. You can find the show wherever you get Locked On NHL. We're on every podcasting app you can possibly think of. Or you can find us over on YouTube as well.
All right, Jay, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Great. Thanks for having me, Gil.
Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You could find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL, both on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. I want to thank my guests. I want to thank Jacob Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets, Erica Ayala of Locked On Kraken, and, of course, Ross Levitan of Locked On Senators for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, we are here every day, Monday through Saturday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the hockey world. So hit the like button and subscribe to Locked On NHL so you never miss an episode. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thank you so much for watching and listening to the Locked On NHL podcast.